If you're preparing to write your first novel, you're probably feeling the way I did when I wrote my first one, completely overwhelmed. And I'm not talking about the anxiety of taking on such an endeavor. I'm talking about the so-called advice you have been getting about what you should do. But today, I'm going to take a different approach. I'm going to tell you some of the things that I did but wish I hadn't.
Okay, let's go.
It's always easy for someone standing on the sidelines to tell you about all of the things you should do when you are writing your first novel. And the surprising thing about that is, a lot of them hadn't even written a novel of their own. You know the type. They're the same friends who will give you extensive advice on how to raise your children, even though they don't have any children of their own. It's easy to tell someone what to do based on your own limited understanding on a particular subject. But 9 times out of 10, that advice does more harm than good. The way I look at it, even though I've written several books of my own, I'm not about to tell you what you should do. And that's because I don't know you or anything about your style of writing. What works for me might actually have an opposite effect on you. People like to give advice based on their own lifestyle. But just because one person's doctor, for instance, told them to eat at least one banana each day because the potassium helps regulate blood pressure and reduce heart disease and stroke, when they pass on this advice, although it was good advice for them, for their friend with diabetes, it can lead to blood sugar spikes, which can be of a great health concern. Good advice is only good advice if it's given to the one it's meant for. So, because of not knowing how to advise you on what you should do, I'm just going to talk about what I shouldn't have done when I wrote my first novel and let you judge for yourself whether or not it helps you in any way. One thing that I did that I wish I hadn't was to start writing my novel before I really knew and understood my main character, which was really a crazy thing to attempt, seeing how my entire novel is based on that character. I had the misguided notion that my main character would somehow develop along the way. That is true to a point. It's important for your main character to develop as your story progresses, but remember, you first need to have a strong sense of who your main character is. That character needs something to develop out of. If you don't know who your main character is in the beginning of your story, how could you help the development of that character through to the ending of your story? Another big mistake I had when I wrote my first novel was trying to be perfect. I'd write a paragraph and then stop writing. I'd then go back to the start of that paragraph and edit it. Then I'd write the next paragraph. Sometimes I'd only get a couple of sentences in when I'd stop and edit again. I always felt the need to have everything perfect before I moved on. This way of writing just doesn't work. From my own experience, I realized all too late that it's all kinds of wrong trying to write a novel this way. First of all, it'll take forever to finish and the flow will be gone, leaving just choppy scenes. And secondly, those edits that I spent so much time completing weren't even real edits. They were really just a waste of time. I realized that you really can't properly edit while you're in the midst of creating. If I made mistakes while in the process of writing, then editing a few minutes later didn't change a thing. I was still in that same mindset. It wasn't until I had finished the first draft and then put it away for a few days that I was able to come back to it with fresh eyes and edit it properly. And almost every one of those earlier edits had to be re-edited. So now I fight the urge to edit while I'm creating and accept that my unpolished first draft isn't supposed to be perfect. Another thing I did during the writing of my first novel that I wish I hadn't was to over-explain everything. This was so bad. I believed that if I didn't explain everything to the fullest, then any potential reader wouldn't get what I was trying to say. So I explained everything. It was crazy. I explained my character's emotions. I explained the backstory. Then I even explained what I was explaining. I explained each scene and I explained the ending so my readers would be able to understand it by the time they reached it. And I know why I did this. I didn't give my readers the respect they deserved. I didn't trust that they were able to follow along and deduce all that was necessary with just a few well-placed insinuations. I forgot that for a reader, a big part of reading a novel is the discovery that they enjoy realizing on their own. They crave the mystery that a writer must provide for them. They like figuring things out for themselves. They don't want everything laid out for them as if they are reading a how-to book for dummies. They don't want to feel as though all of the intrigue has been taken out of the novel, and they definitely don't want the ending explained several pages before they arrive there. I had a good story, but I had ruined it by doing way too much. That old adage, less is more, never felt more fitting. So, during my second draft, I edited a lot of the unnecessary explanations right out of my story and trusted that although this was my first novel, it wasn't my readers' first, and they would be able to get what I was trying to say with very little clarification. Now, maybe you didn't make any of the mistakes that I had made. So actually telling you what you should do from my limited understanding of how best to write a first novel will offer you no help. But if telling you about a few of my mistakes can prevent you from making some of your own, then I'm glad that sharing with you a little about where I went wrong helps, because let's face it, we learn best from our own mistakes and those of others. Thanks for watching, and if you found anything that I said beneficial to you in any way, hit that subscribe button because you never know. My next video might just be helpful too.